You're born 40,000 years ago, somewhere on the open plains of Ice Age Europe. Congratulations, your entire healthcare system is your mother, a handful of elders, and whatever plants happen to grow nearby that don't kill you. No hospitals, no thermometers, no little pink medicine that tastes like fake bubblegum. Just you, your immune system, and a band of maybe 30 people who all really need you to not get everyone sick. Life here is simple in the sense that simple means one bad cough away from disaster. You don't know what a virus is. Nobody does. As far as anyone in your group is concerned, sickness just shows up, uninvited, like a bad house guest who overstays their welcome and occasionally kills someone on the way out. So let's go over the perks of Ice Age immune systems real quick so you don't start panicking just yet. 1. Your group is small, which sounds bad, but is actually your biggest advantage. A respiratory illness needs fresh hosts to keep spreading, and with only 30 people around you, most of whom you've already been exposed to 100 times, an outbreak tends to burn out fast simply because it runs out of new bodies to infect. 2. You spend most of your life outdoors, moving, which as it turns out is exactly the opposite of the crowded, poorly ventilated conditions that let respiratory illnesses spread like wildfire. 3. Your gene pool is diverse enough, thanks to small bands regularly mixing with neighboring bands, that a single new illness is unlikely to wipe out your entire species in one terrifying swoop. Here's the catch. When you do get sick, and you will, there's no such thing as a sick day. You don't get to lie in bed with soup and a nature documentary. Missing a hunt means less food for everyone. Missing sentry duty means a predator might wander into camp. So the group has to make a call almost immediately. Is this person contagious enough to isolate or sick enough that isolating them is basically a death sentence? There's no manual for this decision, no doctor to consult, just tens of thousands of years of accumulated gut instinct passed down from whoever survived making the same call before you. You show up to your first real illness at around age 9, coughing, feverish, miserable, thinking it's going to be simple. Rest by the fire, drink some water, get better. Right? Wrong. First thing you'll learn, your people already have a surprisingly sophisticated set of rules around this developed over countless generations of trial and a whole lot of very unfortunate error. You get moved slightly away from the main fire, not exiled, just distanced, because on some instinctive level, long before anyone understands what a virus is, your ancestors have already figured out that sickness spreads faster when everyone's breathing on each other in a tight circle. Then come the remedies. Oh, the remedies. Someone hands you a bitter tea made from willow bark, which you'll be delighted to know tens of thousands of years later actually contains a compound chemically related to aspirin. Someone else makes you inhale steam from a pot of boiling herbs, which does nothing to kill a virus directly, but does help loosen the absolute swamp that's currently living in your chest. You get wrapped in furs to sweat out the fever, a method with mixed scientific backing but excellent moral support. Someone else insists on rubbing crushed garlic or wild onion near your face, on the theory that the smell alone might chase off whatever invisible force is doing this to you, which to be fair doesn't help the virus but does clear out your sinuses and everyone else's patience at the same time. Congratulations, you are now the test subject in humanity's longest running, least ethical, and most necessary clinical trial. But that's just the beginner stuff. After a few days, things get serious. Your fever spikes, your body's basically fighting a full-blown war you can't see, immune cells swarming an invader that outnumbers you by staggering margins, and for a while nobody, including you, knows which side is winning. Your breathing turns shallow and ragged, your muscles ache in a way that makes even rolling over feel like a chore, and somewhere in the haze you start losing track of day and night entirely. This is the actual danger zone. Not everyone makes it out of this stage. Infant mortality and general illness mortality in this era are brutal by modern standards, and a nasty enough respiratory infection, especially stacked on top of malnutrition during a hard winter, is a real and constant threat, one that has almost certainly already taken someone you know. Somewhere in the middle of your fever dreams, you learn the one skill nobody talks about: endurance through community. Someone sits with you through the worst of the night. Someone else brings water when you're too weak to fetch it yourself. This isn't sentimentality, it's survival infrastructure, the same as fire tending or tool sharing, because a group that abandons its sick members loses knowledge, labor, and cohesion, and a group that cares for them, even at the real cost, tends to hold together longer. You survive. Obviously, otherwise this video doesn't happen. You spend the next several weeks slowly rebuilding strength, and life goes back to something like normal: hunting, gathering, moving with the seasons, occasionally getting a little sick again, and shaking it off faster this time. Because your immune system, having met this particular troublemaker once, now recognizes it and responds faster the second time around. Years pass. Generations pass. And then something happens that changes the entire relationship between humans and respiratory illness forever. And it's not a heroic medical breakthrough. It's agriculture. Around 10 to 12,000 years ago, humans start settling down, farming grain, and critically domesticating animals. Pigs, ducks, chickens, all living in close permanent contact with humans for the first time in history, sharing water sources, sleeping near living spaces, breathing the same crowded air day after day, year after year, instead of the occasional brief encounter a hunter-gatherer band might have had with wildlife out on the move. And here's the uncomfortable twist nobody tells you when they romanticize the invention of farming. A lot of history's worst respiratory diseases, including the actual influenza virus as we understand it today, most likely originated as a bird virus, jumping into pigs, then into humans, a process that becomes vastly more likely once you've got dense, settled populations living shoulder to shoulder with domesticated poultry and livestock day after day, generation after generation. So here's the twist. The question, how did ancient humans survive the flu, carries a hidden assumption that Ice Age hunter-gatherers were out there heroically battling the same influenza virus we deal with today. They almost certainly weren't, not in that form. True influenza, the specific virus responsible for seasonal flu and historic pandemics, appears to be a relatively recent addition to the human disease roster, tied directly to the rise of farming and animal domestication, not to deep Paleolithic history. Your Ice Age ancestors were absolutely dealing with respiratory illnesses, colds, other viral infections, real threats with real consequences. But the specific nightmare of the flu as a fast-spreading, densely transmitted farm animal adjacent disease really escalates once humans start living in the exact crowded, sedentary, livestock-heavy conditions that hunter-gatherer life mostly avoided. Which means your small, mobile, spread-out Ice Age band wasn't just surviving disease through toughness and herbal tea. It was mostly by accident, living in almost the ideal conditions to avoid the worst of it altogether. Once agriculture arrives, all of that protective isolation disappears. Villages turn into towns, towns turn into cities, and now you've got thousands of people packed together, living next to the exact animals capable of brewing up dangerous new viral combinations, with no small band population buffer left to slow anything down. This is the era that actually invents the epidemic as we understand it, and it's also, not coincidentally, the era that eventually forces humans to start inventing real medicine to fight back. So the honest answer to how ancient humans survived the flu is less about clever remedies and more about geography and lifestyle. Small groups, constant movement, and low population density did more heavy lifting than any tea or steam bath ever could. It wasn't until humans built the very civilizations that made life more comfortable, more permanent, and more crowded that the flu as a recognizable, terrifying seasonal menace really got its start, eventually growing into pandemics capable of killing on scales your Ice Age ancestors, living in tiny scattered bands physically could not have produced, even if every single one of them got sick at once. Your ancestors weren't beating a virus through sheer willpower. They were, mostly without knowing it, living in a world the virus hadn't quite figured out how to reach yet, and by the time it finally did, it had humanity's own success, farming, cities, comfort, to thank for the invitation.